And I thought I saw Nayla standing out there by the door. Oh, all right, all you littles, go with Miss Nayla there. We'll see you guys later. All right. All righty. Okie dokie. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So, Aaron, do you mind closing that door, please? Because Nayla is so loud. No, yeah, I'm just playing. All right, so I'm assuming we're back up and live. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much for the words of encouragement that you sent just since this morning. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And yes, continued prayers for all of our friends who are not doing well. All right. So who would like to initiate things today and get things rolling? Don't go all at one time. Okay, thank you, Aaron. That's why I really handed you the mic, because I knew.
Well, and you keep on giving me the mic, so I figure it's okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that kind of came to me is that, both Job and Jacob complained to God, and you kind of had written up there complaining against God. And of course, I just kind of felt the distinction there between someone who has a complaint and they bring it to their authority to wrestle with that, with either wrestling with God with it or just trying to make sense of it. And that is praised in Job and with Jacob. And that's in contradistinction to someone who is in their tent, bickering with the neighbors or complaining with the neighbors about someone who's not present in the room. And that would be the slander, and that would be intolerable. That would be the wickedness, and because we're all gonna. I feel like we're all gonna have some kind of, even if it's disappointing, and we're able to still seek the Lord in it. Everyone from time to time, I feel like, has maybe some complaint. Even if it's something that we don't understand. But
I sure hope so, or I'm toast. So,
so what do you do with that? You speak to God about it. If it's something that you feel like God's let you down, well, talk to God with that, and submit it before Him, and let Him reveal things to you, and because having that fester in your heart can lead to that bitterness. That and what do you do with the bitterness, with the well of bitterness? You throw the branch in there, and let Yeshua come in and make it sweet water, and over time, we can do the same thing. And so, I know for me, it's not the complaining; it's what you do with it. What you do with that complaining. Is it against God and you're talking to others, or is it, hey, God, I've got something I need to get off my chest?
How many times have you heard me talk about me going out and talking to the pine trees? Right. You understand what that means, right? It means I've got a issue, I've got a complaint, and I don't really want to talk to everybody else about it, but so we need to have this conversation. Because you know what I'm thinking anyway, I might as well get it off my chest. So I don't think it is reasonable to expect that we would never have any kind of complaint that we bring to Him. I don't think it's reasonable to think that we won't ever be disappointed with what He's doing, how He's doing it, because usually what that means is it didn't jive with what we wanted, or even what we expected. So, yeah, I think there's a vast distinction in bringing a complaint to Him. The issue, and this is what I was trying to address, is complaining about Him. And the idea of allowing that to grow into or beyond being disappointed into being discouraged, because being discouraged is going to spread. And that was, as far as I'm concerned, that was the issue that was going on in regards to the reaction to the spies' report. Apples and oranges. Okay. Now, let me get this thought out real quick. You remember the parable about the father goes to the two sons, and he goes to the first one and says, I want you to do thus and such. He says, yeah, I'm going to take care of that right away. And then he never does it. And then the one that he goes to and says, I don't want to do that. But then he thinks about it later, and then he goes out and does it. So which one has done the will of the Father? The one that raised a complaint, but then thought better of it and went out and did it, or the one who just said, yeah, I'll take care of it and never lifts a finger to do it? So again, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that we will never have a complaint. I think, as you said, the issue is, how do we handle that? But when we start complaining about God to others, when we start being discouraged and then spreading that discouragement, in effect, we are robbing others of the courage that they had. And that's the cancer. That's what can't be allowed to remain, because, as we see, it went through the whole camp to the point that everybody, and I don't think he's going to do anything unjustly. So when he said everybody that's 20 years old and above, it seemed like the vast majority of the camp gave into this, because he did make the distinction between them and Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, because apparently they didn't do the same thing that all these other people did. So that's the issue. So I'm agreeing with you. It's not about having a complaint, it's what are we doing with it. But also, again, to make very certain that we don't allow our complaint, disappointment, whatever word you want to use, to degenerate to the point that we are so discouraged that we lose confidence in God, or we lose enthusiasm for his purpose, Go ahead. I mean, you were going to say something else. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the only other thing that occurred to me when you said about the spy report, and I neglected to mention, is that one of the, I don't remember if it was you or someone else who had recently mentioned that part of the reason why the other 10 spies were in the wrong, maybe the best reason why they were in the wrong, is that they were talking in public about how discouraged they were about what they saw, rather than saying, hey, Moses, you had us going out and look, here's the reality. I don't think we're going to make it. And speaking to him directly, rather than just doing the report in public. I'm not sure. Did you have a lesson?
I don't know. I didn't have a lesson on that, but
or, teaching. Or
but that is the issue.
Yeah.
They brought back an evil report. Why was it considered to be evil? Because it wasn't inaccurate. Right? I mean, the details were accurate. There were giants in the land. There were fortified cities. So it wasn't that it was inaccurate. So what made it evil? Because it undermined the Father's purpose. Because it spread discouragement, fear, doubt, and all those things to the point that the people are like, we're not doing this. We can't and we're not. And if they're not going to fulfill the purpose, then it's kind of like, and I'm jumping all over the place here, it's kind of like salt that loses its savor. If salt's not going to be salt, what good is it? Right? It's good for nothing. It's just to be tossed out into the street, trodden underfoot. The fig tree that doesn't produce figs, what good is it? Get it up out of the way. Let's put a tree in there that will produce some fruit. So people who are called for a purpose, who refuse to serve that purpose, what do you do with that? And that's what, in my view anyway, that's what made the report evil, because it disseminated this fear, doubt, uncertainty, and general disgruntledness, and which then bred malcontentedness, and it just kind of undermined everything he was wanting to do in the first place. So, anyone else? Yes. Sungwon first, and then we'll go to Nate. Oh, I saw Sungwon's hand, and then we'll come back to Nate. Did somebody else raise their hand? I miss it? Okay, I missed it. Sorry.
I have a question. Today, Torah portion, Moses didn't listen to obey God. God say, speak to rock, but he didn't speak to rock. He says rock using twice, then water come out. What's the difference? God has commanded Sabbath, but a lot of people, we've been through too, but not Sabbath worshiping, but Sunday was worshiping. What's the difference not obey God.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding your question first before I comment. So you're mentioning how Moses struck the rock,
Yes,
okay, and then relating that to the difference between
between God's commandment and Sabbath.
Well, let's see. Let me think on this for just a second. Where Moses striking the rock was concerned, after he told him to speak to it, still produced water. But then later on, what he says to Moses is that because you did not hallow or sanctify me in the eyes of the people, this is why you're not going into the land. So now here's what I've always considered that to be saying. Why did Moses strike the rock the second time when he was told to speak to it? Do you have an opinion? Why do you think he struck it the second time rather than speaking to it?
Because he's angry.
Angry. Okay, I agree. Because he let his emotions get the best of him,
Right.
and it provoked him to do something that he wasn't supposed to do in the sight of all the people. Because Moses was the Creator's representative to the people. And so he was to be a reflection of the Creator. So when he did that out of anger, it did not sanctify the Creator in the eyes of the people. So that's why I think all that happened. As it relates to the other, the command about Sabbath and things like that, I think it's just very important that you and I and all of us, that we do what's right in the eyes of people rather than pointing out what they are doing that we feel is wrong. It's not that we shouldn't, engage in conversations with people about these things. I just think that if we're focusing on doing what is right, we better sanctify him in the eyes of the people rather than going around telling everybody else what they're doing wrong. Because just whatever the issue may be, if I walk up to you and just very, abruptly say, you're doing this wrong, this is how you're supposed to do it. Well, as human beings, what is our first reaction to that? Right, exactly. We're going to kind of, wait a minute, who do you think you are? That kind of a thing.
Oh, I didn't go around and...
Oh, no, I know you don't. I know you don't.
I say, what's the difference sin?
Well, now that's a question for the Creator. I don't know.
Oh.
That's way outside my field of expertise as far as what the difference is. But as you and I, in walking it out, I'll speak to that. So we need to focus on doing what's right.
Oh.
Because when we do what's right, then we sanctify him in the eyes of the people. If we go around telling everybody what they're doing is wrong, how do they perceive the Creator at that point? That's why a lot of people don't want to have anything to do with faith and things that are spiritual, not because of him, but because of some of his servants who are going around doing things perhaps the wrong way. So as it is, which is the greater transgression, that is not for me to say. I wouldn't even begin to know how to address that.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. That's the best I can do. And I'm glad you're here, Sungwon.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So
Where's the can opener?
No can today. No can.
Just
The
playing.
can opener. She's at home. She's got a little.
Oh, got a little tickle? Okay.
A little tickle, and she said, "Well, I'll just stay home."
Well, tell the can opener that we
I'm
said
sure
hello.
she's watching. Hi, honey. She's watching.
If she's
Now
watching,
I'm going to have to come home to an open can. Thanks a lot, Bill.
well, I was going to say, if she is watching, I was just joking.
That is not a can you want to open. All right.
All right.
So, speaking of Caleb and Joshua, what I'm seeing in where we are today is that Abba's showing us a kingdom. He's showing us a body, a bride that is trying to wake up. And we're discouraged by nobody's working together. We're at odds with each other over little stuff. And Abba is showing us the kingdom, but now we've got this COVID thing, and we're trying to figure out how to walk together, but now this COVID thing is kind of telling us, no, you can't do that. It's like a giant's been thrown in our face. Or this illusion of a giant that's been thrown in our face. And what I was thinking about with the grumbling and complaining that went down through the people was that everybody was exposed to it. Everyone. But other people chose to respond to it in a different manner. And those who responded in the appropriate way were saved from that. The others that gave into that temptation of following this other path were dealt with. We are not through this, as you have said many times. There's probably going to be many different waves of what's going on in our lives today. And as that kingdom is trying to take a stand and rise, Abba's trying to call his people to stand and rise, and in the right manner, in righteousness. And what are we going to do when the flu season comes around? Flu is far more deadly and moves just as quick, if not quicker. And I've been in the medical field for well over 13 years, and I don't get a flu shot. And I wear a mask during flu season, not for fear, but because my bosses tell me you have to wear a mask. When in my mind, I'm thinking, how is me wearing a mask going to help them? They're vaccinated. Shouldn't I be the one that's worried? There's going to be a shot that comes around or some kind of vaccine that comes around, and it's going to be probably mandatory. Now, I'm prepared, and I've already talked to my boss about, hey, the vaccine's going to come around. I'm just letting you know I don't get shots. So I'm just letting you know if I got to go, I'm okay with that. Don't you worry about it. Thankfully, she's like, we'll deal with that when it gets here, but I'm not a flu shot person either, so we'll see where that goes. But I was also thinking about, that gossip, grumbling, and complaining, it's going to spread if we allow it. And I'm praying that this will be a different generation of people that will nip it in the bud, and if there's an issue, we'll take it to one another. Like Aaron was saying, if we've got an issue that with Abba, we'll take it to Abba and say, Abba, please help. But we got to do that with each other first. I think that's somewhere in the Bible where it talks about if you got an issue or a problem, you go to your brother, and then if they're not able to hear you, something like that.
I think I read that somewhere, yeah.
I think it's the same way with our Father. Take it to Him. And He hears it. He wants to hear that stuff. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting was that when Korah approached Moshe about, you carry too much type issue, it sparked me to think about Jethro and how he approached Moshe. Jethro didn't have anything the only difference is I think Jethro approached him with humility, but also was very point blank. This is you got to have some help here, brother. But Jethro didn't have a horse in the race. He wasn't looking out for his own, because he had already planned on leaving. He wanted to assist and help, but he couldn't. That's not what his calling was. It was, here's the idea. This is what I think would help benefit you. I don't want to be any part of that leadership, but this is what I think you need. And so is there, and this is the question, is there a difference, and I believe there is there a difference between how Jethro approached Moshe and what was in it for him versus how Korah approached Moshe and what was in it for him?
I think you've already made it kind of evident that there is a difference there. I mean, Jethro didn't have any ulterior motive. He was bringing or addressing a situation because he's got his best, Moses and his family and the people, it seems anyway, that he has their best interest in mind. Whereas Korah, I think that's pretty self-evident as well, that he had his own selfish interests in mind. So yes, I think there's a vast distinction, which then goes to demonstrate that the Creator is not against us coming to someone and addressing them about an issue. It is the spirit and the manner in which we do it. It's what's in our heart. What is the motivation? There's an account in, I think it's Genesis chapter 21, somewhere in there, when Avimelech and the captain of his army come to Abraham and said, we want to make a pact with you because we know that God is with you. And so I want you to deal with me as kindly as I've dealt with you. Avimelech is speaking to Abraham. And so it was at that point that Abraham brought a grievance to Avimelech about the well that Abraham had dug and Avimelech's servants had seized it and this. And so my point is this, that's obviously something that had been on Abraham's mind for a while. I dug this well. These guys took it from me. I'd like to have my well. But look at how he did it. Look in the manner and look at the timing of it. He didn't just barge in and start making demands. He took, when I say he took advantage, I don't mean it in a derogatory manner. He took advantage of a situation and an opportunity that had been open to him to address the issue. So my point is, there isn't anything wrong with bringing an issue, complaint, if you want to use that word, to someone. The issue is when we let it fester and we let it grow into something else and we grumble and we complain and we do all these other kinds of things, or we have an ulterior motive. We have another more selfish interest at work here. This may not be or may not seem connected to others. In my mind, it is. When I was traveling a lot and going to different conferences and things like that, and particularly if I'd go to prophecy conferences, prophecy conference always bring out the most interesting people that you can imagine. I remember one conference, and I'm going to run around Mount Sinai here a minute or two. I remember one conference, this is many years ago, there was this guy that he would show up every year. He had an army backpack. He had the brightest orange hair that you've ever seen in your life. You remember that guy? Called him Carrot Top or something like that. And man, you talking about woo-wee, Twilight Zone stuff, Anyway, why did I tell you that? Anyhow, get back on track, Bill. People will come to you and they'll say, hey, I have a question for you. But they never ask you a question. They go into a dissertation and all these kinds of things. My point is that people will say, they will put on the persona and the guise of humility and righteousness and holiness and all these kinds of things, but in order to advance an agenda. And that is an issue of the heart. And that is what Korah was doing. He had an agenda, but he had to kind of disguise it in, oh, Moses, you're taking too much on yourself. You and Aaron, you're just way too much. And look, aren't all the people holy? So, and then, like you said, Jethro's, it seems his motivation was he sees his son-in-law laboring under this huge weight. And you need some help. It's in your best interest to get some help. And as I read it, the Creator agreed, said, yeah, you need to do this. Here's how you do it. Let me throw one other thing out there, since I mentioned the guy from the Twilight Zone. COVID. Spell that in Hebrew. It's Kud, Vav, Bet, Dalet. I don't have my tablet here. The root would be Kuf, Vav, Dalet. Family word to that root. Even though that root particularly doesn't necessarily mean anything. But if I were to use Hebrew thinking here, and I just go to other sounds, other letters that make sounds, then it would be Kaf, Bet, Dalet. And that root word is what? Kavod. Or the noun would be kavod. Kavod is the verb. But what is kavod? Literally, something that's very heavy. something that's very weighty. So you think about the impact that this has had on our culture, economically, culturally, socially, but maybe even more importantly, mentally and emotionally. The weight of this thing. But from that we also get the word that means glory. Let the weight of your glory, then the lyrics say. So here's where I'm going with this. We can look at this one of two ways. We can see it as this weight that is just pulling us down, or we can see it as the Father's way of bringing out the more glorious things that he wants to do in us and through us. And in my view, one of the things that he's doing in that is got to walk through this minefield here. There are going to be people. It may not occur because of just this COVID thing. There are probably other things that are going to factor into this. But I'm telling you, there is coming a day when people will be coming to you and asking you, what is it you have that I don't have? How is it that you do not fear when the whole world is afraid? How is it that you're walking in blessing and prosperity when all the world is going to pot? And I don't mean blessing and prosperity necessarily in temporal things. You understand what I mean, right? That's not just Bill speaking off the top of his head. That's Bible. That's Scripture. When Abimelech come to Abraham, it was not, let's make peace so that we are not fighting with one another per se. Let's not make peace so that I can set up a trade agreement with you and that we can grow rich together. His reason for wanting to form this pact with him is because I know God is with you. That day is coming. And this whole COVID thing, the whole riots and all the stuff that's going on right now, yeah, it's a weight. And it's weighing on people's minds. It's weighing their emotions. It's weighing on their mental stability in some cases. But at the same time, if we keep our eyes where they're supposed to be, the Father will use these things to bring out that glory, his glory that he wants to be evident in our lives and through our lives. Isaiah 60, arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord is risen upon you. Darkness will be upon the nations and deep darkness the peoples, but the Lord will arise over you and his glory will be seen upon you, and kings like Abimelech will be drawn to the brightness of your rising. So anyway, I agree with you.
We had an opportunity. Well, like I was saying, everybody's going to get touched by this if you've not already been touched by it physically. COVID is also just a common cold as well. So some people who pop up positive could be just that they have a common cold. Not to be, laissez-faire about it, but also, proceed with caution. But we got called to my department to see if there would be anybody that would volunteer to help test pre-surgery people that are coming in, because everybody that comes through our unit has to be tested before they can go to their surgeries. And so I put out a text to everybody to say, hey, is there anybody who wants to volunteer to go do COVID testing? All I heard was crickets. Then I asked a dear friend of mine who is also of the faith, and that person was like, yeah, I'll do it. I ain't afraid of that. And it just I was very prideful, and I think in a good way, that, this person who is also a follower of Messiah was like, yeah, no big deal. I'm in. And, we wore you have to wear proper gear and everything just to be safe, but it shouldn't be a fearful thing. If Abba allowed me to get it, then as long as I did what I was supposed to do to try to avoid getting it, then for some reason or another, there's a reason why, one way or another. And I have to either be like Caleb and say, well, It's his glory. What his plan is, I will follow it, and I will do my best to be in a positive manner throughout this whole thing. Or I could be a naysayer and just be like, oh, this God gave me this, and da-da-da-da, and just jump into the rest of the discouragement of the rest of the population. So I just wanted to encourage everybody here, if Abba is showing us that this may be the time, then we need to be more than ever like Caleb and Joshua at that time where everybody else in the camp is saying, oh, you need to be fearful. Oh, you need to go back home. This whole thing of the body Messiah coming together is not going to happen, and da-da-da-da. I don't know how that's going to look or when that's going to look, but now more than ever, we need to be aware of the guiles of the enemy to try to divide even more, and trust that somehow, some way, Abba's going to, I don't know, maybe figure out how to get us a leader that could bring everybody together in a right manner, without neglecting the truth,
Well, I think he's already picked one. His name's Yeshua. So I know what you mean. I do know what you mean. And that's kind of the essence of why I was sharing what I did this morning, is that whatever the issue is, we can't let these things that the Father allows to come into our lives and touch our lives. We cannot let it be that which divides us and pits us against one another, And unfortunately, there are those that, in my view, are allowing that to happen. People are passionate about their thing, whatever it is. And people can get very passionate, and sometimes our passions can push us, to say things that maybe we shouldn't say or do things that we shouldn't do. And in fact, Beth and I were talking about something, and we've been praying that we would not allow our frustrations, whatever the case may be, we would not allow our frustrations to push us to say or to do something that wasn't wise, that wasn't pleasing. And that's what I hear you saying, that this and this, the other, and whatever it may be coming after this. It shouldn't be the things that tear us apart. We should allow the Father to use it to bring us together. Okay. Who was next? Yes. Let me see. You know what? Let's see. Let me see if I can figure out what you're going to ask. No, go ahead. I'm just playing.
Erica, no. I was talking to you briefly out in the hallway.
Right.
We were talking about. I was talking to Ingrid last night, and I said, what is your opinion on, do you think we have brought the fan out? Are we about to plug the fan in?
As far as the stuff hitting the fan is what,
Yet? So then I said, and then we have July coming up, and we have the annexation in Israel, and I have family members over there, and I was like, what's going to happen in July? And then you brought up the Sahara dust cloud. And so you said, and then you were about to get into it. It looked really deep. And I said, just wait and I'll ask you a Midrash. So I really want to hear we all want to hear, because I told everyone else that you have something. So we're all waiting for the Sahara dust cloud revelation. And we were talking about
revelation might be a little bit of a strong word.
And then we were talking about did it come in from an east wind?
See, now there you go.
Okay, so
there
I want
you
to hear
go.
what you have to say.
I haven't really thought a whole lot about it. No, I'm just playing. Well, all right. The first thing that I thought of was an east wind. All right. Everybody knows what we're talking about. Apparently there was some big dust storms in Africa, and all this dust from the Sahara Desert got blown up into the atmosphere, and it's been slowly making its way across the Atlantic. And the reason it's been so hazy today and yesterday, and I think tomorrow through the weekend, is because of all this dust that's up in the atmosphere, and it's just making it look hazy. So Beth and I were talking all the way in this morning, and just how quickly something can happen. The Creator can blot out the sun. And this is mild compared to what's described for us in Scripture. But, we read these things in the book of Revelation and Daniel and all these other prophets. You go, wow, how is that going to happen? It's going to be really weird, even miraculous. And all you got to do is throw some dust up out of the Sahara Desert, put it in the atmosphere, and boom, And if he does it a little more next time, who knows what it could be like. Because it was kind of weird looking coming in this morning. I don't know what it looked like where you were, but it was kind of strange looking. It looked like it was rain clouds, but it didn't look like rain clouds. So, do what? They were brown, yeah. So, in thinking in those terms, Joel talks about certain natural phenomena, in the day of the Lord. So I'm thinking, are we getting a little preview of how some of those things could happen? But then ultimately my mind works around to the whole idea of the east wind, because from our perspective, this came from the east. So that connects in my mind to what happened in Genesis 41. Pharaoh has the dream. And in the dream, he sees the 7 fat cows followed by 7 lean cows who swallowed up the fat cows. And then he dreams again, and he sees the 7 plump ears of grain. And then he sees that they are scorched by the east wind. So from Egypt's point of view, and this is the understanding I have anyway, that from Egypt's point of view, the wind would have come from the deserts of Saudi Arabia. They would have blown in from Arabia, and it would have come in and just scorched everything that was green and, destroyed everything. You know what the dream meant. It was that Egypt was going to have 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of lack, so grievous that the 7 years of plenty would be swallowed up, as it were. There's a lot of prophecies that talk about the east wind as it relates to, I'm going to use this word, Ephraim. That is Israel, the Israel that's been scattered through all the nations. And there's a lot of prophecies that talk about this east wind that's going to blow in the end of days. And so that's where my mind went. Not that I believe that this is a fulfillment of that necessarily, but just that this is an example of how quickly things could change. And if it was a little bit more dramatic next time, what other ramifications would that have, in the atmosphere? If it happens long enough, what happens to people's emotions and mental state of mind? Because when the sun doesn't come out for a long time, I don't know how you are, but I'm like, I'm ready to go jump off a cliff or something, So to kind of summarize, it's just another one of those little subtle reminders of who's in control and how quickly things can happen. And again, this is mild. I'm not going to make a big deal out of what is happening right now in the atmosphere in terms of literally what's happening, as much as it is the message it sends. I don't know if that made any sense or not. But look at how quickly things have happened just since the beginning of this year. Right. Now, we come to the annexation, or the plan for Israel to annex portions of the so-called West Bank. Well, Hamas, pardon? And Judea and Samaria. Well, in fact, so-called West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria. All right? I don't know how much of the Golan this factors into it. I really don't know. But let's maybe back up just a little bit. All right, if I say West Bank, most everybody knows or has heard that term, right? Because that's referring to the quote West Bank of the Jordan that Israel took in when the 6-day war. That's what the world calls it. But Israel calls it Yesha. Yesha is, what is the right term, Beth? Acrostic or acronym? When YMCA, is that an acrostic or an acronym? Is that an acronym? Okay, I always get them confused. You know what I'm talking about, right? All right, Yesha, which would be spelled Yud, Shin, Ayin. Nate's already ahead of us here. Yesha is, the Yud is Judea. The Shin is Shomron, Samaria. The ayin is Gaza. We say Gaza, but it's Gaza. All right? Now, all right, my head is spinning right now, so I'm trying to make sure I get this all put out there the right way. So, again, what the world has referred to as the West Bank, in Israel it's usually referred to as Yeshua or Judea and the Shomron, but also there's the whole Gaza thing, right? If they annex that, or these portions that they've planned to annex, which my understanding is, as of today anyway, the Trump administration is like, okay, whatever you want to do. Then Hamas says we're at war. Now, come on. When have they not been at war, right? But if they do this, then, I'm sure that Israel is going to be on high alert, which then perhaps connects to what you were bringing up to me about not letting people leave the country, or certain people leave the country right now until, what, September? Is that what you said?
September, this nurse wanted to leave the country, and she wasn't allowed to book a flight. And my daughter was near the Lebanese border yesterday, sent us a video on a family chat, and there was loud artillery going off, and it was scaring all the people on the beach. And nobody knew what was going on. It was basically, my son-in-law found out it was just Israel flexing its muscles, so they're expecting something. So.
Okay. So now this connects in my mind to how quickly things can happen.
Yeah.
Okay? Because what does Joel describe the day of the Lord as being? Day of darkness, gloominess, blood, smoke. And Peter talks about this in Acts chapter 3 too. Anyway, so Joel describes the day of the Lord that way. And Joel's, the context of Joel as it relates to the day of the Lord is really Jerusalem and what's going on in Jerusalem and what's going on in that area. And so this is the issue, all right? So if they annex it, then I think it would be reasonable to assume that there's going to be some certain groups in this world that are going to be losing their minds. And they're going to be trying to flex their muscle as well. And so who knows where that will go from there.
And my niece is guarding Jerusalem on the West Bank. She's in a guard shack. Guarding Jerusalem, so it's scary
Yeah, well, we need to pray for her and all of them. But don't you get the sense, though, take that and these other things that we're talking about, don't you get the sense that things are accumulating, things are piling up, things are stacking up, however you want to put it, because something's getting ready to happen. Okay, now, some people will look at that and say something bad's getting ready to happen. And that could be the weight. But then if the Creator is sovereign, if He's in control of all things, and we believe He is, then something very glorious is getting ready to happen as well. And that's why we need to be in the right place at the right time with the right attitude. All right, so now this is a sidebar. This is really what you asked, but I can't resist. Okay? So, Yeshua, Judea with the Yud, Shomron with the Shin, and Gaza with the Ayin. Now, in a lot of Israeli newspapers, here's the way I have seen that spelled. Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin. As if to say Yeshua, Shomron, and Gaza. But what does Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin spell? Tell them, Nate. Yeshua. So what's at the heart of all of this? It's that glorious thing that we're talking about here. All right? Can I go one step further with this? I think I will. What happened in Gaza a few years ago? The Israelis withdrew from it, right? Basically turned it over to Hamas. All right? So they kind of just gave that over to them, the ancient land of the Philistines and Goliath of Gath and all those kinds of things. So in that Yud, Shin, Vav, Ayin, what's missing? Yud, Judea, Shin, Shomron, the Vav would be the conjunction and. What's missing? The ayin, Gaza, right? Do you know what they call Yeshua? Yeshu. Yud, Shin, Vav. And what does that ayin represent? Eyes. What has to get opened? How are our eyes usually open to the things that God wants to do in our lives and needs to do in our lives? He puts dust in the atmosphere. He allows a virus to touch our lives. People are marching in the streets, rioting. All this vandalism is going on to the point that we're going, what is going on? And when all those things are going on, what usually happens, if we have any kind of heart to hear the Father's voice, we start asking questions. What are you doing, right? And what does he start doing? We start knocking. He starts opening the door. What does he start doing? We start asking. He starts answering. And when we start seeking, what does he do? He allows us to find. He opens our eyes to what he's doing. You see where I'm going with this? So let's go back to the scenario that we're speculating now. You understand that, right? We're speculating. And if this annexation takes place and Hamas has declared war against Israel, even though they're already at war with Israel, but if that means they're going to ramp things up, where do you think most of the ramping up is going to come from? Gaza. ... Because where was Hamas conceived? In Gaza. Where's their base of operations? In Gaza. And so if Israel does in fact annex these parts of Judea and Shomron, and if Hamas does in fact do what they have threatened to do, then that means that a lot of this stuff that they're intending to do is going to come from Gaza. And how might Israel respond to that? We're speculating. But if it leads to events whereby Gaza now becomes, we're going to rethink this whole thing about giving Gaza to you if you're going to do this, and Gaza comes back into play, which is the ayin, then the ayin gets added back, and it's no longer Yeshu, it's Yeshua. Do you see where I'm going? All right? Will that happen? I don't know. But you asked me what I thought. Where's the fan? Seems like the fan. Seems like the fan's already blowing. That's why we have all this dust in the atmosphere. Yeah. Look, when it comes to things like this, prophetically, you know how the prophets or what the prophecies say, how they play out. Again, I spent many, many years speaking at these different prophecy conferences with different people, all the notable guys that teach prophecy. And I respect them all. I didn't agree with them all. But, I respected them as men and as followers of Messiah. But the truth of the matter is, every one of them was just giving their opinion about what they thought might happen. No, I know. I'm just kind of qualifying my statements. So, I don't think so. I think the fan's blowing. I think it's just picking up speed. But anyway, when we talk about these kinds of things, we have to admit we're speculating about what could happen based on the information that we have. But it almost never turns out the way we think it's going to turn out. But when we see it happen, then we go, that's why he said that, Anyway, who's next? Yes.
Jen.
You have a question? Now, is this a follow-up to our conversation the other night? Or different?
This morning.
Okay, this morning. Okay, all right.
Yes, and I appreciate your help on understanding many things.
Good.
My question was, you mentioned unequally yoked.
Unequally yoked?
Yes.
Okay.
And based on my background, so I've heard, my understanding was it has to do with marriage, who you marry. But listen to your teaching this morning, it seems like it's more than that. It covers more than that. Mm-hmm. And now I got confused.
Well, I don't think should necessarily confuse. All right, let's just look at it in terms of marriage. Is it a good idea for a believer to marry an unbeliever? It's not a good idea, is it? Well, because it creates all kinds of problems, doesn't it? And now you're in a marriage covenant, and now you're unequally yoked, and there's going to be this constant struggle. Can it work out? I'm not going to say it can't. I'm just going to say it's going to be incredibly difficult and very trying. So it's not a good idea for someone who is not of the faith to be married to someone who is of faith, or vice versa. But expanding it beyond that, the concept, the principle is, all right, let me back up a little bit. I gotta run around Mount Sinai a little bit. Got the official cup that says so. If you go back to the beginning in the garden, remember the two trees in the middle of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One produced life, one produced death. And the one that produced death, the Creator said to man, don't eat it because it'll kill you. There's something in it that'll kill you. And that tree is characterized as being a mixed tree. Two things that are opposite being mixed together, good and evil. And this is going to go back to your question. And the Creator said, don't eat that. There's something in that fruit that'll kill you. All right. So then the idea going forward is that if you've got a good seed and you plant it in your field, you don't sow some other kind or some other species of seed in that same field. This is in Leviticus 19, I think it is, Deuteronomy 20, 21, somewhere in there. I can't recall just right off the top of my head. But you're not supposed to sow mixed or mingled seed in the same field or in the same vineyard, because the Creator says, to condense it down, it's defiled, it's corrupt. All right? So he gives us natural things like that to teach us of spiritual things. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 15. First the natural, then the spiritual. You have the natural things to teach us of spiritual concepts. So when Paul talks about not being unequally yoked, he is saying that if you and I have been born again, and by the way, when we are born again, Peter says it's of an incorruptible seed, because that is who the Messiah is like, or that's what the Messiah is likened as being, that incorruptible seed. The Word of God is a seed, according to the parable of the sower, right? So when the sower goes out to sow, he's only sowing one kind of seed, because it's the Word of God. There's only one Word of God. There's only one good seed. The good seed is the seed of Abraham in Galatians 3, who is the Messiah. But then likewise, if you are Messiahs, you are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. Are you with me so far? All right. So there's only one good seed, because there's only one Word of God. There's only one Messiah. There's only one body of Messiah. And so, taking all that I've talked about into consideration, the good seed, the truth, the Word of God should not be mingled with something that's false. There's a lot of false teaching now. There's a lot of people who think that there are multiple paths to the Creator, that you can be this religion or that religion or that religion. It doesn't matter what religion you are. As long as you're on this quest to find God, eventually He'll bring you to Him. But Messiah says, no one comes unto the Father except by me. Messiah says there's only one path that leads to life, and it's straight and it's troublesome. It's very narrow, but it's the one and only way that leads to life. It's not broad. All right. So again, taking all those things into consideration, when Paul talks about that we should not be unequally yoked, he goes on to say, what fellowship does light have with darkness, or Messiah with Belial? So he's obviously talking way beyond just marriage. He's talking about if we are to be the light of this world, then why should we mingle with darkness? Now, we're to be in the darkness, but distinguished from that darkness. But we're not to mix with and mingle with that darkness. If we are representatives of the Messiah, then we should not be in lockstep with those who are anti-Messiah. So the short answer to your question is yes, it goes well beyond marriage. Marriage is just one situation where we find why it's difficult for those who are of the incorruptible seed to become one with those who are not. It's not conducive to life. And when we start mixing with things that are darkness, we start mixing with things that are corruptible, when we start mixing with these things that are associated with Belial, the tendency is not for them to conform to our way of thinking, but for us to conform to their way of thinking. And there is the death. There's the corruption. There's the destruction. So I hope I cleared it up a little bit. I still have a book I need to give you. All right? All right, I'm going to take one from up here on the screen here. All right, so there's a question that says, should we fight the battles of this world when this world is not our home? The Israelites were told to destroy their enemies for land he was bringing them. Our home is the kingdom. Well, I don't believe that we should fight battles to defend this world's system. This world is not our home is kind of a euphemism. You know, it's a metaphoric phrase. But in reality, we are going to live in this earth. And we are going to go into the kingdom, which is not way up there somewhere, but that's coming down here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I understand what the person is trying to get across. True, we shouldn't be fighting to defend things that are going to pass away. I get that. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Messiah. We understand that that includes every kingdom, including this one in which most of us live. So should we fight to defend those things, knowing that those things are going to pass away? The only way I know to answer that is to say that there's a reason that we are here. There's a reason that we are where we're at this point in time. And there are certain things that aren't, certain concepts, certain principles that are not limited to being, quote unquote, American. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is not exclusively an American principle. That is something that the writer of the Declaration of Independence says is given to us by a higher power. So I will always fight for life. I will always fight for my liberties that are God-given and within the boundaries that he sets down. And I will always fight for the opportunity and the right to pursue happiness. By the way, that doesn't mean we're always guaranteed happiness. It means that we can pursue happiness. So those things, yes, I will continue to contend for, because those are things that I find in the kingdom, because those are God-given. Am I going to fight for, well, I'll leave it at that. In 1627, I'm assuming that's Numbers. Jonathan, I keep hearing something, brother. I don't know what it is, but can you find out what it is and stop it? All right, Numbers 16:27. All right, so they got up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children. And so the question that's on the board here is, why did the wives of the children die for what the men did? I don't know. Why was Joshua and the children of Israel instructed to wipe out all of the Canaanites when they went into the land, men, women, and children? I don't know. I'm going to quote my good friend Brad Scott here. God's smarter than we are. And I don't mean that to be flippant. I mean that to be, I don't know. I can't understand everything. I have some opinions. I can speculate about it a little bit, particularly where the Canaanites are concerned. Years ago, many years ago, in Israel, we went to Jericho, and the walls of Jericho that fell down flat. Later, they did excavations. They found that the mortar in those stones had the remains of crushed infants, the bones, that they had used that in their mortar. And so it was a very vile civilization. And I'm going to say something that probably shouldn't say. But you know, there are certain cultures in this world that hate God's people so desperately that they train their children to strap explosives to them. They train them to be martyrs. They train them to be these people that go just kill just because they're Israelis. So how do you deal with that? I don't know that I have the answer. But I'll leave it at, I don't know. We don't know that the wives weren't murmuring. We don't know that they weren't teaching their children to do certain things. I don't know. But I'll have to defer to the fact that the Creator knows what He's doing. He's smarter than we are. He can see things from a perspective that we can't possibly appreciate or understand. And I am going to just leave it that He is just and that He is righteous in all of His ways. So anyway, who's next? Yes, Bob.
You answered a question about should we fight to save this world, and then you spoke of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the reason to fight for those things is for future generations as well as yourself. The question before that spoke of being unequally yoked, putting those two ideas together. There are situations right now like the one you just described about children being strapped with explosives because they hate God's people more than they care about their own children. My opinion is sometimes right now especially we may find ourselves in alliance with someone that we would consider ourselves unyoked with. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because sometimes someone you may not be equally yoked with may be fighting the same fight for the same result.
So is that a question or a statement? Both. I think that going forward, that we're going to have to be very careful that whatever fight we're in is the one we're supposed to be in. That might mean different things to different people. You know, personally right now, I'm not in a fight. I'm in a time when I'm reevaluating some things to decide, should I be connected to that? Should I be involved with that? And some things I haven't really gotten a clear-cut answer on. I'm just kind of grappling with that. And there's some things that I feel very strongly about that the Father is not necessarily castigating the fact that I was involved with it, you know, or tied to it, but that now things are changing. You know, there's some things, the other things that I need to get my focus on. And I know I'm talking somewhat cryptically, but that's on purpose. But I think it's just going to be very important that we as individuals, that whatever fight we're taking up, we need to know that we know it's the one we're supposed to be doing. As far as it relates to being unequally yoked and, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I get it. But I'm not so certain that what has worked yesterday is going to continue to work tomorrow. I'm not saying it isn't or is. I'm questioning that. And because going forward, if we are in uncharted territory, at least for this generation, it's uncharted territory. Okay. And the battles are going to be such maybe that we have not been exposed to. spiritual battles, that is. I'm not certain that that same principle would apply. I'll wax political here for just a moment. You know, I'm probably going to get in big trouble, Bob. Thank you very much. There are things that the president does and says that make me insane. Make me want to stick a fork in my eye. You know, somebody get his phone. You know, that's. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And at the same time, here's the man who said and recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I'm like, applaud. Yay. Here is the guy who is concerned about security so that we can continue with the pursuit of happiness and life and liberty and those things. And personally, walls and borders, I think, are a biblical principle. They, you know, the New Jerusalem has a big wall. You know, and it's intended to keep certain elements out of it. So as far as the concept, I'm all for that. I applaud that because I applaud the idea that we are to be a nation of laws. I applaud the idea that he has, at least to a significant degree, stood up for me and my, you know, the right for me to worship as I see fit, not be harassed and attacked and things like that. And I'm like all for that, you know. Going forward, certain situations may cause me to evaluate that a little closer. I don't know what he's going to do tomorrow, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know what position he's going to take tomorrow, you know. Some people are, and I'm just using this as an example to try to make my point. Some people are praying and believing that he's going to have a really genuine encounter with the Almighty, and you know, and is going to draw closer to Him. And I hope that's true. The fruit will tell us one way or the other. But at the same time, all the stuff that's going on and the pressures that are mounting could cause him to go do and take another route. So I'm saying going forward, the enemy of my enemy may not always be my friend. So, okay. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Go ahead.
Do you believe, this time it really is the question, do you believe that...
You were the guy I was talking about. No, I'm
sorry. I don't have red hair.
You know, you'd look funny if you did, Bob.
I might come in with a wig. You know, some of the things you described about Trump, yeah, it's like, why would he do that? He does so many good things, or things that I think are good anyway, and then he does something that just boggles the mind. But so many of these hot topics in the news right now, take all of what I just said there, which of those do you think might really just be meaningless distractions to keep you looking over here while one or the other does something over here?
I think that's potentially all of them. I mean, it's not to say that there's no substance to all these things going on, because there really are people getting sick. You know, that's a fact. I don't think it's the big monster that it's been portrayed to be, you know. And I've talked, we've got at least two people in this fellowship that are, you know, have a medical background and have expertise, and from the few conversations that I've had with them, they seem to, you know, support that notion, you know, that yes, it is real, but it's not the big, it's not the giant that can't be overcome, you know. None of the giants kept Noah from building the ark. Ultimately, the giants didn't keep Israel out of the land, and Goliath certainly didn't stop David from becoming the king. So it's not that they aren't there, but I don't think that they're as big as they are portrayed to be, or the big obstacle that they are portrayed to be. All of the stuff that's going on with the riots and the violence and all those kinds of things, I mean, there's things going on. But this goes back to what I said earlier in the message today. If we're constantly obsessed with all those things, focused on all those things, they do become a distraction, even though they're real. They do become a distraction. And if we are distracted long enough and our eyes are on those things, it becomes overwhelming. I think it becomes depressing. I think it's difficult to do what it is we're here to do if we're always focused on those things. So I think they are all distractions. Now, as far as to get our eyes on that while something else is going on, I think you've heard me say it many times. The adversary is the grand illusionist, which, by the way, was an album cover for Styx. But anyway, that's another story. Some people know what I'm talking about. Some have no idea. Anyway, the illusionist wants you looking here. He does want you looking at COVID. He does want you looking at all this other stuff that's going on because he doesn't want you to look at this over here, which is why we have to keep our eyes fixed on the Messiah and hear his voice and know his leading. And because it's going to be really important when all this pans out, whatever's going on and whatever may happen in July, it's going to be critically important that you and I are in the right place at the right time with that right attitude, because that's the only way we're going to be able to do what we've been called. And if I may preach a little bit, thank you, I think I will. Go to Revelation chapter 3. All right, verse 8, he's talking to the congregation of Philadelphia, which again, Philadelphia means brotherly love. He says in verse 8, I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. You have a little strength, but you've kept my word and have not denied my name. All right, so real quick, he looks at them, he observes, and he sees that they have a little strength. It seems to me that if they have little strength, that means they have gone through a lot of stuff and it's worn them out. They're weary. But even though they are weary, they have remained faithful not to go against his word. They have been faithful not to deny his authority. They're holding on. All right? How many of you feel like sometimes you're just kind of holding on? All right? But they've been steadfast in that. So he says, I have set before you an open door. And this is going back to what I was just saying. We have to be in the right place, the right time, the right attitude. Because eventually that open door is going to be there. And that door leads to something that we're supposed to do, whether an individual, a family, or a fellowship, a people at large. That open door leads to something that we are supposed to do. And it's really important that we're there on time, because the open door isn't always open. Sometimes if you've had to go out to buy oil in the middle of the night when you should have already gotten it, by the time you get to the door, you find out it's shut. So all this stuff that's going on is real, but yeah, it is a distraction. Is it just a distraction to have us looking at this so that we're not looking at what else they're doing? Probably. But more importantly, I think it becomes a distraction for you and me if we allow it to take our eyes off of what he's doing. That's what we really need to be focused on. What is he doing, Bill? I think he is conditioning us for the things that lie ahead. One wave follows another wave, follows another wave. And with each wave, we find out a little bit more about ourselves, where our weaknesses are, perhaps where our strengths are, where our focus has been, where it needs to be, etc. But if we'll allow him, well, let me rephrase that. As he allows these things to touch our lives, if we use that as an opportunity to let him continue to do the work in me, bring to the surface those things that need attention, then I have confidence that he'll lead me to that place at the right time with the right attitude, so that I can do what it is I've been placed here to do, that you can be ready to do what you've been here to do, that we as a people can. So I know I rambled a little bit. Yes, I believe there are distractions, but not just in the sense to keep our eyes distracted so that we don't see the other things they're doing. Because anything that's done under the cover of darkness is eventually going to be brought to the light. And I have enough confidence in him that anything they're doing in darkness, he'll bring it to the light when I need it to be brought to the light. That's what I think. All right. Oh, yes, Nick, go ahead. I didn't recognize you with that haircut.
Just call me Bob Jr. in training.
Well, wait a minute now. You got to part your hair down the middle.
That hasn't happened yet. All right. So everything that we've been discussing this morning as far as things that are happening, we have fears, we have jealousy, we have strife in the mix. Back in Moses' time, we have some things being said today, possibly. Psalms 105, 1 Corinthians,
I've not heard of that book before. Run that by me again.
First, Colossians 16 talks about not touching the anointed.
Okay.
Does this fit that saying, that scripture, and what does that mean? Touch not the anointing or the anointed. Because I see you as the anointed for this congregation, that Yahweh has set forth a calling, and you and Beth have stepped into that position. You have taken on that responsibility. And if somebody comes against you, is that touching the anointing?
If Beth and I have been appointed to shepherd this congregation, then I think it's important that people be very careful about how they would try to undo that. If Beth and I, as the shepherds of this congregation, are acting in error and doing anything that is contrary to his will, then he'll find somebody to come to us and confront us about it. I have every confidence of that. And so this is kind of one of those, I'm going to walk a tightrope here, because I don't want to sound presumptuous, but I want to be faithful to what I understand this to mean. Okay? If the Father had need to remove us, that there is a protocol that I believe that would be evident that this is the Father. And I think, first of all, he would send someone to us to address it. And usually, whether it's somebody that's in a pastoral position or whatever kind of a situation, it's been my experience that usually if he's going to deal with somebody, he's going to send somebody to them to talk to them. I think that's what was being addressed over here at some point. Who was it? I forgot now. That said something about that. Maybe it was Aaron. You were standing over there when you said going to God instead of going to everybody to talk about God. Well, the same concept applies. So if we were in error, then I believe that he would send someone to us to address us, because he's that way with you, with me, with anybody. He's going to give us opportunity, right? And this is an extreme jump over into something, a jump over into an extreme situation. But you read in the book of Revelation where this woman that was in the congregation of Thyatira, he called her Jezebel, and he said, I got a little problem with you because you've allowed Jezebel to teach in your congregation, and she's taught my people to engage in sexual immorality and all these kinds of things. And so I gave her a space of time to repent. Then I had to throw her in a sick bed, right? So my point, even Jezebel, he gave opportunity to turn, because he just doesn't start overturning everything until he's given everybody an opportunity to address something. So back to your question, I think I'm not above, Beth is not above being confronted about something, okay? But this would go back to the motivation. What is the motivation? Is it Jethro coming and saying, man, you know, you're really kind of messing up here and you really need to do this or you need some help with that so this thing can work right? Or is it you're just taking too much upon yourself, I think I need to take your place, okay? So Korah would be, in my view anyway, he would be the one that's doing it the wrong way, and that becomes evident later. But it is not to say, and this is how it was used when I was growing up, and I disdained this, that someone in a position would use that verse to say, subtly, you can't say anything against me. You can't come to me and confront me about anything because I'm the anointed. You can't touch that. You know, no, I don't believe that. I don't see it that way. You know, I'm just a guy like you. And I think I've made it very, very clear, and if I hadn't, I'll reiterate, that we came into this kicking and screaming. And if he wanted us out, he doesn't have to work real hard. Okay? It would only take just a gentle little nudge, you know? And that's, all right? But I think he would do it, if it was the Father, he would do it in order. It would be done in an orderly fashion. You know, the only chaos that would ensue if it was first done in an orderly fashion is if I dug in my heels and continued to do what I wanted to do in defiance of what he was trying to correct me in, then there'd be problems. Because you read in the book of 1 Samuel how in chapter 2, in the days of Eli the high priest, and he had two sons, Hophni and Pinchas, who were sons of Belial, and they did not know the Lord. And Eli was allowing his sons to engage in unspeakable things in the door of the sanctuary, and they were taking the offerings that belonged to the Creator, and they were basically, they didn't know him. They didn't, you know, they wore the vestments of a priest, but they didn't respect anything about it. Eli's problem was he was allowing these things to happen. In chapter 2, an unnamed prophet. The Creator doesn't even give us his name. Now, what does that conveys to me that he's not going to make a spectacle of this situation. The spectacle will be because you didn't heed my warnings. You didn't respond to my voice. And if you don't listen to me, then there'll be a spectacle. And the result was Eli, you know, the Ark of the Covenant is taken captive. Hophni and Pinchas are killed, and Eli falls backward off and breaks his neck. And just like that, things have changed. So anyway, I hope I've answered your question, but I want to make certain this is clear. I'm not one of those who believes that just because you are in a position of authority does not mean that you can't be approached, rebuked, corrected. But I also believe that it should be done whether it's a person in position of authority or not. Any kind of rebuke or correction or anything like that should be done decently and in order, and everybody needs to check their heart and their motives before they open their mouth.
I find it interesting that the questions that came up from Korah was kind of what Hashatan did in the garden with the serpent, caused a question to go out. Yahweh had specifically told Moshe where to go, how to do things, who was going to be priest. He'd already told him. So Korah comes up with questions, and the snake in the garden did the same thing. Come up with a question. Did Yahweh say?
Right.
Surely you will die. And so the first bit of trying to undo Yahweh's word is always done with a question, or it seems to me that it's always done with a question.
Excellent point. It is an excellent point because it's planting that seed of doubt. Is this really what he said, or is this really what he meant? All right, so going back to Korah, that's one of the reasons eventually all of this rebellion leads to this. Okay, I want everybody to get your rod, and bring it into the tent of meeting, and let's see which one buds. We're just gonna throw it down here, and let's see which one buds. Let's see which one you can make that happen. You know that story. But also, you people from these different tribes, you're notable men, you get your censers, and you bring them, and you offer the incense offering. You remember how it turns out? And all of those censers that those unqualified guys brought that were consumed, you know what they did with those censers? They nailed them to the brazen altar. So every time somebody approached, there was this subtle little reminder that there is a way that you approach me. And there is a way that you do things, and that way is my way. And this is what happens when you foment rebellion and potential anarchy among my people. This is the reminder. And interestingly enough, those censers from those men were actually considered at that time to be holy and could not be used for any other purpose. Fascinating to me. All righty. Who? Yes, sir.
What's your take on the parallels with Trump and Cyrus?
It was almost 5 o'clock.
And the sevens.
I don't really have an opinion on the latter part of that, honestly. As far as him being a Cyrus figure, I'll say this. And I think I've shared this with the group before. If you go back to 70 years before that embassy was opened in Jerusalem, you go back 70 years to the day, the announcement was made that Israel, after 2,000 years, was now a nation. And the first nation to recognize them as being sovereign was the United States, under the leadership of Harry S. Truman, another man known for his vulgarity and profanity and brazenness and, you know, being rough around the edges, which I find kind of interesting. You know, I'm going to go on a little sidebar here, you know, and again, I've shared this with our congregation before. I've always been intrigued by George S. Patton. From a little age, you know, my dad took me at 7 years old to see the movie Patton with all the language and all that stuff. You know, my mother didn't know about it at the time. But, you know, since I saw that movie when, you know, George C. Scott walks up in front of that big American flag, and as a kid, I'm thinking, man, that guy is down front. That's the way it impressed me. And then he started swearing and everything else, and I'm like, oh. But I was just, from that age, I was always intrigued by Patton, and more broadly, the fact that people like that, like Patton, were convinced that God put him on this planet to do something. As vile and vulgar and as profane as he was convinced, Patton that is, was convinced that he was here to serve a purpose. And he felt that his purpose was to be a soldier. So I've kind of presented the thought or the question, if that person who is vulgar and profane and, you know, a prima donna, if he can be convinced that God placed him on this earth for a purpose and then commits himself to fulfilling that purpose, how much more so should we as his people be convinced that we are here for a purpose and then commit ourselves to fulfilling that purpose? So my point here is this, that God will use vulgar and profane people sometimes to indict God's people or to challenge God's people or to provoke God's people. If I can use this guy to do it, then why can't I use you? If I can find this guy to do it, why can't I find some among my people to do it? All right? So that's kind of how I feel about Trump, is that, you know, I know that a lot of people want to paint him with the best brush they can, but let's face it, the guy is arrogant. He is brazen. He is vulgar. He is profane. He is really proud of himself. And these are attributes that kind of fly in the face of what you and I are supposed to be. But at the same time, where's the guy that recognized Jerusalem as being the capital of Israel? I'm a Ronald Reagan guy. Even he didn't do it. You know, by the way, I don't know who left that coin on my desk, but I'm keeping it. You know, there's a silver coin with Ronald Reagan on it, you know. Anyway. Do what? It was left in the mailbox? All right, well, I'm keeping it. Anyhow. You know, but even somebody like Reagan didn't do that. You know, so here's this brazen, take the bull by the horns kind of a guy doing stuff, and some of it good. So who am I to argue that God has to pick some meek little fella to make things like that happen? I'm not. All right? Is he a Cyrus figure in terms of what he does? Maybe he is. Is that to mean he's to be venerated and exalted in some way? No. It's just like Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is my servant, the Creator says. But Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem, tore the temple down, carried temple treasures off into Babylon. You know, but yet he's my servant. He's doing what I put him here to do. I'm using him to do something, to make a point, to bring about a particular end. Same thing with Trump. He's using him for a particular purpose, to bring about a certain end, and all of it somehow, some way factors into God's overall plan. And all right, I'll leave you with this, because 3 minutes, I can stretch this out. I am intrigued by the fact that if you take the name Truman, you write it T-R-U-M-A-N, and then you take the name Trump, T-R-U-M-P, there's those common letters. So this is, you know, the tinfoil hat time, okay? Take those common letters, T-R-U-M, and transliterate them into Hebrew. It spells a word that is related to the word teruma. And the teruma were the contributions that the people brought to Moses, who then distributed them to Bezalel and Oholiab and the different artisans, who then took all of those contributions and transformed them into beams and bars and screens and veils and all the things that pertain to the tabernacle for the building of the tabernacle. And then we get into the annexation of certain parts of Judea and Shomron, and Trump is taking the position of, it's your country. So how would those people view him? That's why they minted that coin with Trump's face next to that of Cyrus, because that's how they're perceiving him, as a Cyrus-like figure. Not that he is to be venerated and exalted, but that God is using him to serve a purpose. And it seems to me that it may be, anyway, that the Father is using him as someone who's at the very least willing to step out of the way and not put this too much pressure on Israel, so that Israel can be their own sovereign land and all their own sovereign nation, and kind of do what it is they feel is in their best interest, and not be like past administrations, Republican and Democrat, who put this exorbitant amount of pressure on Israel to do what was in the best interest of Western powers. So that's my take. And it's 4:59. Anybody real quick? Anybody real quick? No, I'm just playing. I do have one last question I'm going to read from online. And we'll close out with this. This comes from Blue Garin. I think his name's Carl. Will the Hebrew lessons with Nate be online? Are you okay with that? Doesn't bother you any? All right, which that starts Tuesday night. This coming up Tuesday night. Our own Nate Taylor is going to be 5:30 in the afternoon, Eastern time. So all I can tell you is that we will try to work it out. Did you hear me say the word try? What did I say? We will try to work it out. It involves, probably getting Alan involved. But if we can work it out, then we will do it. If it doesn't show up at 5:30 Eastern on Tuesday night, then you have your answer. All right. But we will try to do it. At the very least, we'll record it so that we can put it back up on one of the Facebook or YouTube or what have you. So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and conclude for the day. And Mike Shaw, will you come up here, please? You knew I was going to do that, didn't you? As soon as I looked your way. Aaron, will you hand him the microphone? Let's just all stand and let's dismiss in prayer. Remember those who need a healing touch. Remember those who are in need today. Is it Sophie? Tessa, okay. Tessa, who's serving in the IDF, who right now is... Oh, okay. But Tessa's the one that's kind of on the guard duty right now, right? And there's other people that we just want to keep in prayer. So keep them in your hearts and thoughts and prayers this week. Mike?
Abba, we thank you so much for today. We thank you for the teachings, Bill's tenacity to study your word and to bring it to us. The questions that were asked here today and be expounded upon. I know I came here this morning with the thinking about the world, leaving here today thinking of you. I pray that everyone here just keeps you on their mind and their hearts, and we look to you, as Bill has been saying all day today. We need to look towards you. Help us to be reminded of that each and every second of our life. So easy to be forgetful sometimes. I'm speaking of myself, but we love you, we praise you, we thank you for your infinite mercy that abounds every day. And we thank you for all the prayers that are going forth today for those that we love and we care for. And we pray for healing for those people that are sick. In the name of Yeshua we pray. Amen.
Amen. A very early Shavua Tov, and everyone have a great week.